Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and now that Marvel Studios Thunderbolts is streaming on Disney+, we can now go through the movie frame by frame to truly break down every detail and Easter egg you missed in what was, I'll say it, the best Marvel movie of 2025. Like, I really like Fantastic Four First Steps too, but for whatever reason, it was Thunderbolts or New Avengers that stuck with me all summer. So let's do this and uncover like 100 more details that we were able to find since our first breakdown when the movie released earlier this year. Also, you may have noticed I'm wearing one of my favorite shirts ever, our New Avengers shirts that you know Red Guardian would approve of. You can grab one of these as a gift for yourself or for that special nerd in your life, even if that is yourself, at nerdriot.shop. It's like the best way you can support New Rockstars. All right, let's start with this awesome opening Marvel Studios title card sequence. This might be the last time we see the Marvel Studios title card looking like this for a Marvel film, with the flashing comic book images appearing on the inside surfaces of the letters MARVEL, but already this movie subverts it in two really interesting ways. All the images are from Sentry or Dark Avengers comics, and two, the logo ends up getting overtaken by the shadow of the void, which of course foreshadows the threat this power poses over this entire world in this movie, and the fact that this movie's whole opening title card is dedicated to this one character might also just underlie how important Sentry will be to Dr. Doom and Avengers Doomsday. The character of Sentry was created in September 2000 by Paul Jenkins and Jay Lee, who wanted to create Marvel's Superman, but not in terms of his personality, but rather just his power set. And they chose to introduce the character in a really cool way. As first just a middle-aged man struggling with addiction and with his mental health, who had this dog, and he didn't even realize had superpowers. Rick Veitch, who co-developed the character, had this idea to market his introduction as a sort of meta character who had supposedly been part of Marvel Comics history from the Golden Age, and then had existed in all the different eras since then, through the Stan Lee and Jack Kirby Silver Age in the 60s. But then, due to some cataclysmic event, everyone in this universe forgot about Sentry's existence, including Bob himself. And then he suddenly flashes back to his memories of being a superhero named Sentry, who had taken a super soldier serum 1,000 times more potent than the one given to Steve Rogers that gave him the power of 1 million exploding suns. He could manipulate reality, use telepathy, go toe-to-toe with pretty much every Marvel character, from Hulk to Galactus's Herald, Terrax to Rogue from the X-Men to Dr. Doom. Spider-Man recalls Sentry fought Galactus to a stalemate. He even rips Ares in half. Ripping people in half has kind of become Sentry's thing in the comics. Sentry also shares his consciousness with a dark, malevolent entity called the Void. So this movie reinserting Sentry's comics history in the place of normal comic book images on the studio logo is a reference to this in-universe retcon. The idea in the comics is that Sentry is supposed to have existed in our universe since the beginning. It's not that his watchtower gets built over Avengers Tower. Avengers Tower got constructed over the site the watchtower was, and no one even knew it was there. Now, the Void has a similar ancient origin, speculated to be a separate entity that latched onto Bob when he became Sentry, with roots as far back as the Old Testament, part of the plagues of Egypt. But part of Bob's struggle with the Void is that he's never quite sure if the Void is a symptom of his own shame or if it's something else. This movie poses the question, does the darkness that we all feel at some point in our lives come from someplace real, like outside of ourselves and objective reality, something that was always there before we were broken enough to sense it, making it a kind of cosmic shadow demon that we have to fear throughout our lives? Or is it just a kind of inner pain that comes from our own experiences, something that we all create together through our suffering, and therefore something that can unite us so that we can help each other get through it? By the way, I love the sound the Void makes as it silences Michael Giacchino's Marvel Studios theme, orchestral section by section, silencing the horns, then the woodwinds, then the percussion, and then leaving us back to the strings of the Marvel Studios fanfare, and then kind of a transposing shutdown sound effect. It's like you can hear each of the musicians' sections getting voided one by one. Now, I was able to identify a few of the Sentry comics in our very first breakdown, but now that we can go frame by frame, our researcher Noah helped fill in the rest. I think these comic images alone tell a really interesting backstory to the character, but if you do just want to get to the opening scene of the movie, you can skip to the next chapter. We see a short-haired Ryan Topper Sentry from the recent Jason Lue series, which ended in May 2024. This image is from the 4th issue of the run. In this comic, Sentry's powers have been split between multiple civilians, and Ryan Ryan is going around killing the other sentries because he sees them as unworthy. So this is Ryan slamming one of the other sentries along with Jessica Jones into the street. We see the sentry with the S on his head from Mighty Avengers number 10. We also see the Void firing guns from the same page of that comic. We see Sentry fighting the Void from the end of 2005 Sentry run, which actually ran into 2006. Here he is fighting with the Void for the last time of that run before he chucks the Void into the sun. We see the Void screaming on the left of this frame is from 2006's Sentry number 6. We see Bucky and Alexei throwing the shield from the 2023 Thunderbolts run, which we're pretty sure was created to tie into this movie, as this was the same run that featured Val and debuted OXC. Bucky's catching a shield thrown by Red Guardian in the first issue here, and these images are from the same side-by-side panel. We see another image of Alexei from that same issue here. We see this image of John Walker saying, "For Caleb and Emily," which is from number 4 of that same 2023 Thunderbolts run. Caleb and Emily are the names of his parents. On the left here is Yelena from the cover of 2023's Thunderbolts number 2. We see the bottom of this page from 2006's Sentry number 5 by Paul Jenkins, art by John Romita Jr., the panel where Dr. Worth tells Robert, "You're not going to shoot me, Robert. You're not going to hurt anyone because secretly you want to do good. Give me the gun." And then Bob splits into his Sentry Void forms as he screams, "You're tearing me apart!" Meanwhile, the eyes on the left are from 2018 Sentry number 3. This is a panel from Sentry Fantastic Four number 1. He's actually taken a hit from the Cosmic Cube here, which refers to one of the more powerful items in Marvel Comics. The panel on the left is from Siege number 3. At this time in the comics, Norman Osborn is running his own version of the Avengers, the Dark Avengers, and he has manipulated Sentry to basically treating Norman as his mentor or father figure. So this here is Norman Osborn ordering Sentry to destroy Asgard, which he does by flying through it and collapsing the entire city. This panel is from Dark Avengers number 6. In this scene, Norman Osborn orders Sentry to go kill a bunch of Atlantean terrorists, which he does. It is similar ring to the scene where Valentina orders Bob to kill his fellow heroes. And hey, if you've been waiting for a Norman Osborn cameo in the MCU, not including the Willem Dafoe Norman Osborn from Spider-Man No Way Home, we got it here. We also get an image of Dark Avengers number 12 when Sentry appears and fights Molecule Man. In this fight, he learns that he has a similar ability to control the molecules around him and reforms himself after being torn apart and then disintegrates Molecule Man. This illustration of Void is also from 2006's Sentry number 5, the same comic where he says, "You're tearing me apart." We see the same design of the Void from a little later in that run, Sentry number 8, wearing a trench coat and a hat. Here he is holding a dead cat and taunting Robert. And this is a cover of Sentry number 8 from 2006. The panel in the middle of this frame of Bob in his civilian clothes surrounded by rubble is from Sentry 2018 number 2. The close-up of the eye beneath it comes from a splash page in 2018 from number 3. And the shot on the far left with his teeth is from Sentry number 4 when he's in a showdown with his old sidekick Billy, who has taken the Sentry serum in a bid to become the new Sentry. On the far left is Void's eye from 2018 Sentry number 4. This is when Bob and the Void fuse together to become the merged Sentry. And speaking of merged Sentry, here he is taking Billy into the Void dimension in 2018 Sentry number 5. Merged Sentry always rocks the red and black suit. And here's a shot of Billy taking the serum on the far left. This is in 2018 Sentry number 3. And the image below is from right after he takes the serum shot. This shot of Sentry telling Void to "Shut up, Void!" comes from Sentry number 1 in 2018, right before he rips Void in half. This takes place in Sentry World, which exists within his mind, so he's not actually ripping the Void in half. We also see the 2005 rendition of Void on the upper left here. The image on the far right is also from Sentry number 1 in 2018 during the same scene. The image on the far left is from 2005 Sentry number 3 as Void has captured the Hulk. And on the far left is Watchdog, Sentry's dog. This is also from Sentry number 3 in 2005. He's biting Sentry after Sentry, as the Void, broke most of the bones in Hulk's body. This panel shows Void masquerading as Sentry. This is from Beta Ray Bill Annihilation Scourge, and he's fighting Beta Ray Bill here. Bill throws Bob into a portal where he eventually meets and bonds with Silver Surfer, forming Silver Sentry. The image on the far left is from Sentry number 4, 2006, and pairs with the one of the Void when they're merging together. And in this one on the far left, as a Void Shadow Army from Black Panther and Agents of Wakanda number 1, where Black Panther and his team find Sentry in Oklahoma with the Void's army attacking a small town. On the right here is Sentry talking to the Void in a vault that Sentry built supposedly to contain the Void, but the Void was actually out and in Sentry all along. Here the Void is telling Sentry he's crazy and talks to himself, which is true. This is Sentry number 2, 2005. This is from Siege number 2 when Sentry is fighting Ares before ripping Ares in half. Now these two slides are from Dark Avengers number 14 when Void is taken over and Norman has to go talk down Void as Iron Patriot. It also shows the Watchtower, which is Sentry's headquarters. In the comics, the Watchtower exists as kind of on top of and within Avengers Tower. The building initially belonged to Sentry, but when he lost his memories, the Watchtower was also hidden from the public, and Tony Stark built his tower in the same space. When the Sentry removed his mental blocks in New Avengers number 10, the Watchtower reappeared atop of Stark Tower. The 3 panels on the right of this frame show the old school versions of Sentry from number 4 of his original 2000s run. You can actually see a panel of Billy getting his arm torn off by Void, and the panel on the left is from the cover of Siege number 2, so I'm guessing that skull is Ares, though he doesn't literally hold a skull in the issue. This one is from Sentry number 4 in 2018 and shows a creation of the merged Sentry. This image here is the retro design at the very end of 2009's Age of Sentry number 1 by Jeff Parker and Paul Tobin. This is a Sentry flying some crooks to jail in a very Spider-Man-esque panel. Age of Sentry was a run done in the style of Gold and Silver Age comics and featured the Sentry family, including Sentry, Sentress, Scout, and Watchdog. These are framed as in-universe tales that Reed is telling his son, Franklin Richards, before bed. In the comics, Reed was one of the Sentry's closest friends before he lost his memories. And then this image is from Age of Sentry number 4, where Sentry fights another version of himself, the Golden Age Sentry. And then this is from Age of Sentry number 4 and shows Sentry pushing the blonde Phantom out of the way of an attack by a villain known as Tyrannus. And then in this shot, the guy on the left is part of the Void's Shadow Army from 2018 Sentry number 1. This panel is from the same comic as Billy/Scout fights that same Shadow Army. You can just make out Watchdog's little puppy paw pads too. And staying in Sentry number 1 from 2018, on the left is Sentry as he punches through the moon, although it's Sentry world, a world that exists in his mind, so it's not literal. And then on the left is Sentry from Siege number 3 after taking a hit from Thor. Whew. So I thought it was worth to go through all those images and revisit Sentry's violent history with the Void and various other characters like Hulk and Thor and Ares, just to keep in mind how vicious the guy is against even the most powerful Marvel characters. Bob being aligned with the New Avengers is probably why Sam Wilson's old Avengers are in conflict with Bucky and the rest. I think we've only scratched the surface of what the Void can do. We're gonna see its true power in Doomsday. And that Void is actually where we open with Yelena Belova, Florence Pugh, who returns from the 2021 Black Widow film and the Disney Plus Hawkeye series, and might, if rumor has it, even appear in Spider-Man Brand New Day, before she definitely will come back for Avengers Doomsday. Yelena is still mourning her sister figure, Natasha Romanoff, and is now working in special ops for Val. We see her in tight close-up as she closes her eyes, meditating as her voiceover says,
"There's something wrong with me. An emptiness. I thought it started when my sister died, but now it feels like something bigger. Just a void."
So right away, Yelena references the Void that we will all be battling in this movie, and she even questions whether it was caused by her grief over Natasha or if it was something bigger that was always there. Precisely on the word void, she steps off the ledge, a cue to us that the void of this movie is also a metaphor for mental health and self-destruction. So not only does the jump underscore the dark thought spiral that Yelena is going through, because at first we don't know why she's jumping off a building or if she even has a parachute, also it recalls Natasha's deadly leap from a cliff in Vormir in Avengers Endgame, and putting Florence Pugh through a real practical jump that she actually did feels like a bit of redemption for the character, considering the most maligned moment of Black Widow was a very VFX shot of her doing a very fake jump. Yelena is on top of the second tallest building in the world, Merdeka 118, and Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. They actually had Florence Pugh on top of this building and had her step off of the ledge, but with support wires, the shot swaps in a stunt performer who did the parachute base jump. Now you'll notice Yelena is not wearing her Black Widow costume that she was wearing in Hawkeye, but instead is dressed in a baggy tracksuit. This was actually Florence Pugh's idea. She said this in an interview about it, quote, "Yelena is so lost at the beginning of the film, she has no reason to be here anymore. She lost her sister and her family. Her relationship with her father is broken. She's in such a state that she's happy to put herself in danger. So during the first costume fittings, when I was supposed to don my superhero suit, I said, no. If she's asking to be thrown into these deadly missions, she should be wearing something that doesn't protect her." We then discussed her wearing a tracksuit. So even though she's still doing all these cool stunts, she's basically going into missions completely naked. It adds a texture to her desperate wish for someone to end it all for her. So yeah, we don't even know Yelena has a parachute on her until it opens with Yelena's voiceover coming at the precise moment of a punchline.
Or maybe I'm just bored.
I love it when the opening line and visuals of a movie contain the multitudes of the movie that follows. The deep emotions, the literal physical threat, the state of mind of the protagonist, the tone of the movie, the action that we'll see in the movie, and ultimately the humor of the movie. Like, come after me if you want for saying Thunderbolts is a better movie than Fantastic Four First Steps, but compare these opening seconds to the completely forgettable opening shot of Fantastic Four, which is just an establishing shot of the Baxter building with Earth 828 and a scene that could have come at really any point in the first 30 minutes. And indeed, considering all the re-edits to the way that movie opens, it probably did originally come later. Yelena lands atop another building and takes down a guard.
Ooh.
I do love how Yelena considers herself a ghostly figure, since the Hawkeye series revealed that she was one of the dusted after Thanos' snap and returned back to life 5 years later. The guard wears an OXE hat. This is the logo of Val's holding company, Ox Group. OXE was mentioned in recent comics, 2023's Thunderbolts Volume 5, Number 1, a secretive group formed by a version of Valentina Allegra de Fontaine that gives Bucky intel that he brings to Val to form a new Thunderbolts team. Beyond that, there's really no history to OXE in the comics, and the group might have just been created to be in this movie. It kind of seems to be taking the place of Oscorp, which was the weapons company of Norman Osborn, who had the whole relationship with Sentry that I talked about in the opening minutes of this video. Yelena fights her way through this building in an uninterrupted overhead shot. I love it. It's lit to create this stunning visual of long shadows, another visual foreshadowing of the void and how it flattens victims into long shadows just like this. This whole movie, whether or not Yelena realizes that she is fighting her own void. Among Yelena's moves is the firing of her electrified Widow's Bite, the wrist projectile that she inherited from Black Widow Natasha and something that we saw her use in Hawkeye. We also see her do a version of the Hurricanrana move, where you wrap your legs around your opponent's neck and throw them down, that Natasha Black Widow made famous in a similar sequence in 2011's Iron Man 2. The music we hear in this sequence and throughout the film was composed by Sun Lux, the band who also composed the score for Everything Everywhere All at Once, and it just plays so well against a group of characters who are going through a similar journey of being sucked into their everything bagels. Mostly it comes up throughout this movie as a 3-note bass melody. Boom, doom, doom. And I'm just not able to even hear that anymore without feeling what this movie made me feel. We realize that Yelena's opening narration is actually her talking to this bound guard from the Ox Group in this lab as she tries to access the inner room with the tubes of serum that she needs to destroy under the orders from Val. Yelena finds the guinea pig in a maze, which mirrors the maze of shame rooms that they'll have to navigate to the center of Bob's mind in the final act. In the background on the far left of this room are 2 frozen shadows of the very first Ox Group text that Bob/Sentry voided.
Now that's a face that can open a scanner.
They're just there behind Yelena in a lot of these shots, and I just like how she's so dead inside and so focused on this mission that she doesn't even comment on the very spooky things that went down here. But this tells us that Bob and the Project Sentry were a recent breakthrough. Now, what was the trigger point? This movie doesn't really say, but I've always wondered if it could have been some material that Val or others might have gathered from the celestial mass in the Indian Ocean. Just one of the other medical breakthroughs that President Ross talked about, because otherwise you have to imagine they would have been trying to recreate the super soldier serum for a long time before this. This scientist with a gun tries to explain this to Yelena.
No, it could end the world. Valentina doesn't understand what happened here.
And the scientist closes his eyes in hesitation, not wanting to see the face of the person he's about to shoot off. Ironically, that's what's going to happen to him. So Yelena takes advantage of this and pushes his gun aside, hides behind the table. I like how we stay on Florence Pugh for a long time without cutting, as we see her using the reflections on the glass to see this guy and then distract the scientist by throwing a flask across the lab. Just really smart action direction throughout this film. Yelena pounces on him.
Oh.
Yeah, poor guy gets his face shot off. Yelena walks off with a guinea pig as the floor of this lab explodes. According to behind the scenes material, this movie's production actually set off practical black powder charges for this effect. And yes, the sweet guinea pig does show up in the credit sequence on the bow of the rowboat. We move on to Washington, D.C., where you can see the Capitol building, and the Washington Monument has scaffolding around it to repair the damage. This is a really fun detail referencing the recent Red Hulk battle in Captain America Brave New World, which included Red Hulk leaping after Sam from the White House and scraping part of the Washington Monument. You can also see how many of the trees in the Washington, D.C. area appear to be showing autumn colors, which gives us a clue of what time of year it is right now. Might be an important detail when we try to figure out when the post-credit scenes 14 months later time jump has taken us to. We see Bucky's black vibranium arm clutching a bundle of legislation packets as he's now an elected congressman representing Brooklyn, as we learned in Captain America Brave New World. Remember, Bucky and Steve grew up in Brooklyn. Depending on how federal election districts are divided in the MCU, Bucky could be representing the 8th district, which in our reality is Hakeem Jeffries' district, the House Minority Leader. Now, all of the Brooklyn districts lean heavily Democratic, and I would just be curious to know what kind of campaign Bucky ran. Unlike Senate seats, which can be appointed by a state's governor, House seats are always left empty until special elections fill them. So either way, Bucky definitely won an election. He was not appointed, he had to run. People had to vote for him, which is hilarious because Bucky Barnes was a brainwashed assassin and a renowned fugitive and a super spy for Soviet Russia. It doesn't matter that he fought in the Battle of Earth. He still had that track record. And according to Sebastian Stan in a segment for Stephen Colbert's show, Bucky Barnes was the assassin who killed John F. Kennedy in the MCU continuity.
I'll tell you what doesn't have a limit. Captain America's capacity for friendship. He's always been there for me, even when my dog died and I had to call in sick for work, or when the Soviets had me shoot JFK. He was really cool about that.
Now, back in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Bucky Barnes gave no indication that he would ever want to seek public office, but since the Sokovia Accords have been repealed, according to episode 8 of She-Hulk, and yeah, Bucky Barnes did help win the Battle of Earth, there'd probably be some local leader in Bucky's hometown neighborhood of Brooklyn that urged him to run, and he would have had enough support. Like, I probably would have voted for him. Bucky doesn't seem to like this job, though, or know really how to talk to the media.
The rumors of wrongdoing are very worrying. They are very concerning and worrying, and I think that my Brooklyn constituents deserve better, so we're going to get to the bottom of this worrying issue.
Do you think he's worried? Actor Wendell Pierce, who also played Daily Planet editor Perry White in DC Studios' Superman this summer, is here as Congressman Gary, though the writing of the scene comes very close to having the actor say the title of the other film.
All part of an illegal operation to develop your own super person.
Congressman Gary is the chairman of a hearing on articles of impeachment against Val, who we learn in Black Panther Wakanda Forever is the director of the CIA in the MCU. Val's signature hair stripe color is now silver, and she wears a white suit, white being the historic suffragette color worn by modern-day feminist politicians. And many viewers likened her look in this movie to Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard during her confirmation hearing, even though this scene was shot well before that hearing and well before the 2024 election decided who would even be on the slate of the DNI confirmation. One of the other representatives is Congresswoman Elkins, which could be a nod to a different Marvel character named Sentry, Curtis Elkins, from the 1993 Venom Lethal Protector storyline. Completely different version of Sentry, though. Congressman Gary testifies that before serving as CIA director, Val chaired Ox Group, which answers some questions about why she recruited John Walker in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier and Yelena in Black Widow, but does continue to have us asking about her marriage with Everett Ross. Val testifies,
"Right now, there are multiple rogue nations with technologies that far exceed our own.
She's likely referring to Wakanda and potentially also to Slalo Khan, because in Black Panther Wakanda Forever, she was after vibranium tech of both of these kingdoms. Val also says,
And you'll recall that our last president turned into a bright red superhuman monster who nearly destroyed this city."
Of course, referring to the events of Brave New World when President Thaddeus Ross turned into the Red Hulk after manipulative blood treatments at the hands of Samuel Stearns, the leader. Val says,
"The Avengers are not walking through that door."
Which Bucky Barnes reacts to as he literally just walked into the room. He too will have a personal arc in this movie to formally step into the role of being an Avenger. Val says,
"That is why the onus is on me, on us, the American government, to shield its citizens."
She emphasizes the word shield, I think to imply that there once was a government organization called SHIELD that aimed to do exactly this, but ever since SHIELD fell due to HYDRA corruption, there really has been no government agency doing quite that function. This scene ends with a really funny edit.
So you don't mind if this committee continues this investigation?
Oh, of course not.
Val and her assistant Mel, Geraldine Viswanathan, rush to clear out the Ox facility. Val tells Mel,
Just get rid of any hanging chads that could get me impeached or land me in federal prison.
the hanging chads is a reference to the 2000 presidential election and recount in the state of Florida, where hanging chads were the punched out pieces of ballots that were alleged to result in counting errors that assigned some votes for Al Gore to Pat Buchanan. Red Guardian Alexei Shostakov, David Harbour, watches on his TV footage of an old Soviet parade. I'm a history nerd. I was actually able to figure out exactly what footage they used for this. It was a May 1st, 1981 Labor Day parade in Moscow's Red Square, and that's Prime Minister Leonid Brezhnev that Alexei is waving behind. I love how they inserted a younger, thinner Red Guardian into this actual historical footage, Forrest Gump style. It's very funny, and Alexei mutters,
"Those guys with the little waves, get out of my way."
I love this because the Soviet Central Committee back in those days did have these goofy little waves. We see other VHS tapes stacked around his TV labeled Sci-Fi Fantasy, and then another May 27th, 1981. We last saw Red Guardian in the Black Widow film, where we learned he was a Soviet counterpart to Captain America in the 1980s, who then became a spy in a fake family living in Ohio along with Melina, Natasha, and Yelena. And when the family was exposed, they had to flee to Cuba, where the family was split up. Natasha and Yelena went into the Red Room training, and Alexei, years later, ended up in prison in Siberia until Natasha and Yelena busted him out. Now he works for a limousine driving service, Red Guardian Limo Service, protecting you from boring events
evening.
In Alexi's dumpy home, we see a poster labeled Red Guardian in Russian letters. We see posters for motorcycles. On the fridge, we see various past due bills. We also see old Red Guardian propaganda prints, like one behind Yelena of him using a hammer to break a chain on an anvil. We see another poster of Red Guardian posed with a woman. Alexi says,
Move to DC, best decision I ever made.
Isn't this technically Baltimore?
No, Baltimore start next block over.
hey, Alexi lives in the same city as Isaiah Bradley. They'd be fun to pair up, considering they were both imprisoned at some point by the governments who once used them as super soldiers. Alexi says,
Yelena, what is wrong? Light inside you is dim even by Eastern European standards.
another reference to the battle of light versus dark that will physically be overtaking Yelena throughout this movie. Yelena finds a framed photo of her youth soccer team, the Chesapeake Valley Thunderbolts, which is where they'll get the team name of Thunderbolts. The team lost every game, and we learned there was one girl on the team who pooped in the middle of a game, Mandy. Director Jake Schreier said they actually wanted to shoot that as the silly post-credit scene, as a handheld video shot by Alexi, but they realized that since this would have been in the early 90s in Ohio, Alexi would have been using his American accent and it would have just sounded like David Harbour commenting on the scene. Yelena calls Val about a more public-facing assignment, and Val gives her one last covert job to stop Ava Starr, Ghost, Hannah John Kamen, from robbing the Ox Vault buried a mile deep in the desert in Utah. Since we last saw Ava Starr in Ant-Man and the Wasp in 2018, Janet Van Dyne giving her quantum healing particles healed her chaotic phase shifting so that she now has greater control over it. I love how the editing of the dialogue syncs with the action here.
Intel's come in that a rogue operative with attributes perfectly tailored to rob me is intending to, well, rob me.
Yelena follows Ava into the base and into the incinerator floor, where she finds paperwork on Project Sentry. We can read on the paper one page with mugs and shirts with the Sentry logo. We see artistic renderings for the Watchtower and written on it, Doc 090678, please do not release. There's another page all about hairstyle. We can read favorability of hair by shade, with blonde at the peak of the distribution, and then written beneath, hairstyle market research. Research shows that hairstyle and color can have a profound impact on trustworthiness and perceived competence of an individual. The following market research surveyed 400 participants to evaluate which stylings are most associated with trust. And we can see options for bald, 23%, the highest being for what looks like what I'm going to call the Seacrest or maybe the Tony Stark at 79%, followed by what looks like the Peter Parker at 67%, but who knows who the hell Peter Parker even is. Then a mullet at just 15%. Then the wavy, messy look, 59%, that Val wrote yes next to, and that's what Bob will later have. And then a super long, wavy Fabio look, 46%, that Val wrote, it just won't fly next to. There's also a pie chart in the bottom left for hair color. Yelena also finds a photo of a shadowed body, as well as a row of body bags, presumably other failed test subjects before Bob Reynolds. But the shadowed body was not one of the ones from the lab that we saw earlier, so Bob must have gotten to even more people before he was eventually stopped. We see another page showing 8 alternate designs of the Sentry logo, and there are 3 blurbs probably written by the same marketing expert. Strong iconography. The logo features bold geometric shapes and lines to convey a sense of strength and security. The use of sturdy interconnected elements evokes feelings of stability and reliability, reassuring customers of the brand's steadfastness. Customers of a superhero? We're getting into some territory of the boys here. Then, recognizable and simple. The logo employs clear minimalist design principles, making it instantly recognizable and memorable. Its simplicity ensures that it can be easily reproduced across various media and scales, maintaining brand consistency and visibility. Evokes emotional reactions of safety and confidence. And then, universally timeless appeal. The logo design transcends cultural and demographic boundaries, appealing to a wide audience regardless of background and preferences. Its timeless aesthetic ensures longevity and relevance, standing the test of time amid evolving trends and preferences. Yelena gets shot at by John Walker, Wyatt Russell. She blocks his fire with a suitcase. He kicks Yelena pretty far across the room because remember, he took the super soldier serum during the Falcon and the Winter Soldier when he was briefly Captain America. While he had to give up the Captain America shield, he has acquired a new shield which is very scratched up, implying a number of vicious missions since we last saw him. Taskmaster Antonia Dreykov, played by Olga Kurilenko, attacks John, and Ava attacks Antonia. So we're getting a full circle of 4 targets all trying to kill each other. And it's pretty clever how Val structured it so that each killer would be the most effective over the target's weakness. Like Ghost is targeting Taskmaster, because although Taskmaster can replicate any attack move, Ghost could phase through any surface and still surprise her. Also, Taskmaster can only replicate attacks they can actually see, and Ghost can kind of briefly turn invisible. Taskmaster targets targets John because while John is juiced up with super soldier serum, if he were to face someone with parallel combat moves, he could easily get confused and flustered. John targets Yelena because Yelena is the smallest and likely most vulnerable to John's relentless strength. And then Yelena targets Ghost because while Ghost can phase shift, Yelena is the most subtle and agile and would have the best chance at catching her before she phases. Poor Olga Kurylenko gets one line in this movie as Taskmaster. When she strikes John, she retracts her mask to tell Yelena,
"I'm not here for you."
I do like how her mask retracts in pieces, each layer folding in on the higher layer. During the fight, we get a really good demonstration of everyone's abilities. I love this sequence. Ghost phases through John in order to punch Taskmaster. Yelena fires her Widow's Bite at Ghost, and Ghost phases away, so the probe zips through where she once stood and hits John, who's able to take the hit because of his serum. And then there's this shot, which I always call a how the did they do this shot, where Yelena pounces on Ava and tackles her, and Ava teleports away, and Florence Pugh is briefly suspended in the air over something that was just there and then falls from that height to the floor. How did they do this? It's fun to figure out, but you can, because clearly all of Ava from the top of the shot to the end of the shot was a visual effect, but for Florence Pugh, they suspended her with wires, and then they yanked her back a foot off the ground to make her look like she was putting her weight on something, and then they just dropped her. But they sell the gag by having a practical version of Ghost kicking her in the ribs. I just love little production magic tricks like this. John uses his shield to flip a table that Yelena was hiding behind, bumping into Bob's crate to activate it. So in a way, it was really John that woke him up. One of my favorite moves shows the exact target chain in a single maneuver. Yelena flings the knife at Ghost. Ghost phases so that the knife goes through her, and then she catches that knife and then flings it at Taskmaster, who reads the maneuver right away and repels it off of her shield over to John, who catches it and then stabs that knife down at Yelena, who's only able to hold him off by using the Widow's Bite to electrify and tense up his hands. Ghost and Taskmaster duel, and we really see how Taskmaster perfectly mirrors each of Ava's strikes and launches her through some crates. Ava retaliates by phasing right in front of Antonia, and blam, R.I.P. Taskmaster. We see a trickle of blood oozing down from the bullet hole in her head. This is why trailers for this movie hardly showed Taskmaster aside from a very clearly VFX shot of the group in Avengers Tower with Taskmaster painted in. But originally, Taskmaster was going to have a much bigger role in earlier drafts of the script. The first draft of the Thunderbolt script was written by Erik Pearson, Marvel Studios' go-to screenwriter for a number of their titles. Pearson's original plan for Taskmaster was to have her live through the entire film. She would have bonded with Ava, seeing as both of them had similar upbringings, being raised in a lab and trained as weapons. Pearson said that Ava, having won her autonomy earlier in the chronology than Taskmaster, was kind of big sistering her a little bit in a way to show how to break free and be your own person. Pearson also mentioned that there was a running joke where Taskmaster would forget that they all moved past trying to assassinate each other. Like, quote, she was struggling with her own memory loss stuff, and there was a gag where she just kept restarting the fight and forgetting that they had just made up and became friends. They would be discussing the plan of how to get out of the vault, and she'd just go after John again, and they'd all have to pigpile on each other and pull her off and be like, no, we know each other. We've had this conversation before. However, when co-writer Lee Sung-jin came in, having worked with Jake Schreier on Beef, the script was retooled to focus more on Yelena going through a dark period in her life, and the Taskmaster arc was removed from the film. But Erik Pearson didn't even know the script was changed that drastically until he went to an early screening and said Taskmaster's death shocked the hell out of him. Also, Pearson told The Hollywood Reporter that Sentry wasn't even in the original drafts, but he added him in as the writing process progressed. Originally, John Walker was once in the middle of Valentina's plan instead. He said, quote, there were a lot of versions where Valentina had planted this kind of time bomb inside John Walker, and the goal was to make him the most unlikable person on the team. He then becomes the monster, and the Thunderbolts have to talk him down. It didn't ever totally work. He said that Val would have manipulated John Walker into thinking his super soldier serum was wearing off and would enhance his powers further and further until he became a time bomb. Now, Taskmaster's death gets a stomach-turned reaction from Bob. Bob is played by Lewis Pullman, who also played the pilot Bob in Top Gun Maverick. He stumbles out from behind a crate, vomiting. He tries to run out, and the blast door slams shut, nearly crushing him, reminding us of director Jake Schreier's sickening panic room automatic door gag in Beef. We cut from this scene to a charity event for the First Responders Family Fund, hosted by Val, honoring the Avengers from the Battle of New York. We see banners reading, honoring our heroes, with Captain America Steve Rogers, Iron Man in his Mark 7 armor, Hawkeye, and the others depicted. We see Loki's scepter on display, which would no longer contain the Mind Stone, and must have been recovered from HYDRA when Von Strucker extracted the Infinity Stone from it. Val also shows off a pair of Chitauri handcuffs, which she says came with a new property, meaning these were left behind when Happy Hogan supposedly moved everything out of the tower in Spider-Man Homecoming. This exact model of the handcuffs actually comes from the Guardians of the Galaxy video game. It's a very deep cut. We can also see the broken A from the word Stark when the tower was first Stark Tower, the A that was left standing at the end of the battle to inspire the tower to become Avengers Tower. And in the background of some of these shots, I think we see a bust of Steve Rogers with the wider helmet with the goggles from when he saved Bucky and the Howling Commandos from World War II. Congressman Bucky chats with Mel facing that big A.
You know, Kierkegaard says that life can only be understood backwards.
The full quote from Danish philosopher Soren Kierkegaard is, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards." And I like how it applies to what these characters will have to face going through their own personal voids, facing their past shame and dark memories. Bob introduces himself to the rest of the group. He can't remember how he got in here and seems to have a completely wiped memory, similar to how when we first meet Bob Reynolds in the comics is having memory issues. John gets quickly annoyed at how many times Bob says Bob. And if you notice from this point on in the movie, John ends up saying most of the lines he says to Bob with Bob, like, "Stop asking so many questions, Bob." And he ends up saying Bob way more often than Bob does in this movie. John talks about Ava,
the infamous Ghost, a S.H.I.E.L.D. reject on the run from 15 nations?
After the quantum tech accident that killed her father, Elias Starr, Ava was taken in by Bill Foster and was made a S.H.I.E.L.D. operative before she went rogue. John describes Taskmaster.
The dead one over there, she destroyed half of Budapest.
Don't talk about it like that.
And you.
Yelena says this out of respect for a former fellow Widow agent who was stuck under mind control from Ivan Dreykov, but also talking about anything in Budapest in the MCU does remind us of this line from 2012's Avengers.
Just like Budapest all over again!
You and I remember Budapest very differently.
John claims that he was the official Captain America for a time.
Yeah, for like 2 seconds. Before you publicly murdered an innocent man on the streets. Do I have that right?
Really define innocent.
They're referring to the Flag Smasher who, in episode 4 of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, killed John's friend Lamar Hoskins, after which John crushed that guy to death with the Captain America shield, smearing him with that dude's blood that led to John getting dishonorably discharged and recruited by Val thereafter. John also says he has a loving wife and son, referring to his wife Olivia, whom we met in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but John's shame memory later reveals that he walked out on his wife and his young son. There is a pretty funny pan over to Bob, who laughs without understanding the full context.
That was funny. Thank you. We needed that.
It's getting so tense in here.
And it's funny in this moment, but it's sad later when you realize that he just laughs to diffuse violence because he grew up in an abusive household. The red lights turn on as the incinerator warms up, and they look for a power source for the frequency device that traps Ghost in this room. They pry open the panel to defuse it, but John barges in with a shield.
On your left!
On your left, showing that the favorite salute between the other Caps, Steve and Sam, is something John has fanboyed out over too.
On your left.
On your left.
Wyatt Russell, though, did not initially remember saying this line and reveals that he didn't want to put it in. He says that Jake Schreier added the line via ADR while they were editing because he felt that John needed to say something before coming in with the shield. You can actually see evidence of this being added without Wyatt actually saying it in the scene later, because we get another angle of John Walker hitting open the door and his mouth is not moving as he moves in. Ava does get the door open at the last second and they all jump to avoid the fire, but Yelena ends up touching Bob's hand, taking her to the void for her shame memory. Violet McGraw returns in the 2021 Black Widow film as young Yelena, a few years into her Red Room training in some kind of test to lure out another trainee, Anya, into the snowy woods during lunchtime, and then a man comes in to shoot Anya. The book Anya drops reads Snigurushka, which refers to the snow maiden of Russian folklore, the granddaughter and helper of Ded Moroz, the Russian Santa Claus or Father Frost. The snow maiden began as a Novi god character from Russian fairy tales, one about a peasant couple with no children, and then one day a snow sculpture miraculously came to life and became their adopted daughter. Snigurushka brought joy to her parents, but didn't live long because she was challenged by the village children to jump over a bonfire and melted. Earlier in this film, Yelena dismissed fairy tales to Alexei, maybe because she feels like this Snigurushka, who melted before she could bring real joy to anyone. I also like how this movie makes Alexei the Russian Santa Claus, dressed in red and white, with a big beard, driving a sleigh, and even called Santa by Val later in the movie.
Who is this old Santa?
And David Harbour also played Santa, or a version of Santa, in another movie. Val's plan to use a strike team to take out Yelena, and the rest is overheard by her limo driver, who just so happens to be Alexei, who will from here spend the next several hours in a very long road trip out west to Utah. John snaps at Bob.
Less talking to yourself, more talking to us.
In the comics, Bob would often have long talks with the Void, but it was revealed to him be talking into a mirror from Sentry's second run. John slams Bob against the wall, and for a moment, Bob's eyes glow a pale gray as the Void begins to peek out. I really like this detail because while the Void is mostly marked by shadow, the Void's eyes do emit a pale gray glow. Yelena encourages Bob, who wants to stay put even if it would mean his death, and she says,
loneliness. I get that. I get it. And that darkness gets pretty enticing. And then it starts to feel a little bit like
a void.
Yelena says what she does with that kind of void is shove it way down, advice that he will later apply and cause major problems for Yelena. Bucky reads Congressman Gary's packet, spilling a chili dog on it and his arm, and washes his vibranium arm in the dishwasher. He pops it back on and rotates it, similar to when he popped it back on in the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Why the focus on chili dogs? Could it be Bucky feeling nostalgic for his days having fun on Coney Island with Steve? Coincidentally or not, chili dog is the last words of the first run of Sentry. It's a food that he and his sidekick Scout bonded over. In that comic, Sentry has lost his memories again and runs into Scout working at a fast food restaurant where he orders a chili dog. Mel calls and remembers being in high school when the Battle of New York happened. Bucky says he was like 90. There's that age again for never aging superheroes.
Disney brought him back. They're gonna make him do this till he's 90.
Which I think this scene establishes to show how Bucky knows to go to the Utah desert and how he knows to drive them back to Avengers Tower in New York City. The crew gets into the elevator shaft and John tries to leap up, but for a moment, he disappears into the inky darkness, and it's another visual example of a character sinking into an Everything Bagel-esque void shadow. They ask Ava if she can phase shift up the walls.
Well, I'd have to know where I'm going, because I've never been able to hold it longer than a minute, so I'd just get lost in an ocean of dirt, and then I'd be crushed to death.
It's similar to the logic Alan Cummings' Nightcrawler gave when they were trapped in a base in X2.
Can you teleport inside?
No. I have to be able to see where I'm going. Otherwise, I could wind up inside a wall.
Bob proposes they inch up the shaft back to back to back to back to back. From above and from below, they form an asterisk shape, which is so fun. And remember, Val said this malt was a mile deep, so that's a long way to inch back up. Mel shares with Val Bob's personnel records, and on the screen you can see some interesting details. Reynolds, Robert, biography. Earliest available hospital records indicate Robert Bob Reynolds was a victim of domestic abuse throughout his childhood. There are no records of criminal charges filed in relation to these reports. Following a car accident, Reynolds was addicted to orally administered morphine during middle school, but was able to finish 8th grade before ultimately dropping out less than a year into high school. He has a history of drug-related arrests for non-violent crimes, including breaking and entering, larceny, and burglary. It also lists his hometown as Sarasota Springs, Florida. We see Bob's mugshot from when he would have been a teenager. The group realizes they have no good way to get from their position onto the upper level. Bob mutters to himself,
Always making things worse.
This, we will later see, is what his mom would say to him when he intervened when his dad would abuse his mom. John snatches Yelena's baton and pushes off, ready to let them all die, but Yelena instinctively latches her cable onto Bob, who sneezes. When Bob and John touch hands, John is taken to his shame memory, a scene that really struck me as a parent who has found myself doom scrolling while with my kid. John reads an article that uses the photo of John Walker from the end of episode 1 of Falcon and the Winter Soldier when he was given the shield. The article reads, Fall of a Hero, the John Walker story. Few have fallen further from grace than the putative heir to the mantle of Captain America, John Walker. Not long ago, Walker was thrust into the public consciousness with all the fanfare Washington could muster. Story by Rory Bruin. And Rory Bruin is the art director of this movie. He previously worked on Christopher Nolan's Tenet. The story of what went wrong starts long before his unveiling, just a few short years ago. While no one could doubt that the boots of Steve Rogers were big ones to fill by any man's standards, Walker did seem to fit the bill. A decorated combat veteran from the Army Rangers. When John comes out of the shame vision, he turns back to look down the deep pit of the elevator shaft, as if he looks ready to jump, considering it for just a beat too long, like Yelena's self-destructive leap that opened this movie. Bob tells them that when he was younger, he worked a summer job as a meth-addicted, sign-twirling chicken, setting up the crazy moment in one of his void shame rooms later. In the comics, Bob was for a time a meth addict and actually stole the serum while high, thinking it was more drugs. Later in Sentry's first run, Reed Richards would compare Bob's desire to be a superhero as, quote, his new addiction. Val and her commander, Holt, send in a strike team. Val and Bob have another private moment where he reveals he took the medical trial with Ox Group to try to make something better of himself, saying that he's always had these episodes since he was a kid, with a high, then a big low, followed by a blank. Later, we can infer that these started by witnessing his father's abuse, but it's just murky enough to imply that the void might have always existed in him. Yelena fights through the strike team, tying Bob to herself with a fire hose to keep him from helping. It sets up how these two will be tethered together around the neck in Bob's attic in the void later. They're able to get out of this place dressed as Strike Force soldiers, and when they get stopped at the checkpoint, Wyatt Russell gets the biggest laugh from me when the gate guard again orders him to identify himself.
Identify yourself.
No.
Bob creates a diversion and he gets shot, but he gets back to his feet, his medical garments shredded from the gunfire, and those ain't the only thing that's shredded. I actually wonder if his abs here could be a reference to Age of Sentry #1 when Bob first takes the serum, at least in this comic anyway, and the bottom half of his shirt tears off so that you could see his new abs. The void creeps into Bob's eyes, and Son Lux's music works into a frenzy, leading Bob to blast up into the clouds and then come thundering back down to Earth, landing in a huge shockwave. This is actually visually reminiscent of Sentry's destruction of Asgard in Siege. Here he just fell, but in Siege he flew straight through the city, which was hovering over the US at the time, and toppled it. Yelena shows John and Ava the paperwork from the lab that explains how Bob was a successful case of Project Sentry. Ava reads, "The power of 1,000 exploding suns," and "the golden guardian of good." They changed it to 1,000 instead of 1,000,000 as it is in the comics, but even in the comics it does go back and forth between 1,000 exploding suns or 1,000,000 exploding suns. We also see the quote, "He will stand for humanity's hope," which is a line about Sentry from New Avengers #9. In his first ever issue, Bob began to remember his past in the form of comic books. This would be a recurring motif throughout his stories. Golden Guardian of Good was the marketing tag on the cover of one of his issues/memories, and his catchphrase was, "We are humanity's only hope," the "we" referring to himself and his watchdog, who is unfortunately absent from this film. The phrase makes more sense in context of the comics, as in Marvel lore, Sentry was one of the first publicly accepted superheroes and was active before even the Fantastic Four made their public reveal, at least in the chronology, obviously not into the publication history. John says that he heard rumors Ox was on the verge of a breakthrough, but it got shut down for being too extreme and test subjects kept dying. In Sentry's third run, his sidekick Billy took the Sentry serum, but as he used his powers, they had a pretty drastic effect on his body to the point where he used his laser vision. It did a lot of damage to his own face, but for whatever reason, perhaps because of the void, Bob was able to withstand the serum. In the comics, Sentry was part of the super soldier program, given a serum 1,000 times stronger than what Steve Rogers had, so it sounds like Ox Group was continuing this legacy of trying to use a new serum cocktail to create a government-controlled human weapon, but again, I think material gathered from Tiamat might have helped trigger that breakthrough. Ava asks Yelena if she knew Antonia, and Yelena says yes.
She had a tough life. She killed a lot of people and then she got killed.
Yelena didn't have much time getting to know Antonia Dreykov after Natasha gave her that anti-brainwash antidote, but really I think she was just so conditioned by the Red Room to feel hardly anything when another widow died. Alexi's red limo pulls up. On the drive back, Alexi compliments the team Yelena has put together, noticing that the light inside her has grown brighter. John sarcastically says,
"Go Thunderbolts."
And Alexi assumes that she genuinely named them after a Pee-wee soccer club. Alexi remembers that they were sponsored by Dimitri's Elite Industrial Lighting and Electrical, not Shane's Tire Shop. It's clear that Alexi's favorite business in their Ohio town was some other Russian buddy of his. Wyatt Russell and David Harbour had a joke that Mark Rylance would have played Shane from Shane's Tire Shop. Wyatt said that David was basically riffing off of Shane and making a whole world around his character. Alexi tells him that this team has the power to be on the Wheaties box. Since Alexi was an 80s Russian hero, he likely would have been jealous of American athletes and celebrities who got to be on boxes of cereal. An Ox convoy catches up and Alexi hits the gas. The limo tops out at 54 miles an hour, and we see the limo has over 98,000 miles on it, which is way higher than a novelty ride service within a city area should have on it before the service would be like, I'm just use a new limo. Alexi activates his defensive measures, which turn on party lights and fog, and Genuine's pony is similar to the gag in Thor Ragnarok when they're escaping Sakaar on the Grandmaster's pleasure yacht.
It's my birthday!
Alexi takes a swig from the vodka bottle and makes a Molotov cocktail that hits the armored truck and then immediately goes out. Yelena leans out of the window and shoots, and one of the armored trucks blows up and flips, but it wasn't her, it was Bucky! In my favorite interview clip ever, Florence Pugh describes a take of Wyatt Russell that they ended up using for this movie.
We did a take where Wyatt turned around and went, Bucky!
Bucky rides up, taking out these trucks with the same explosive discs that we saw him using on Nick Fury in 2014's Captain America: The Winter Soldier. The way Bucky rides up through the dust and then grabs a shotgun and flips it is totally an homage to the Terminator in the chase scene in T2 Judgment Day. Sebastian Stan even confirmed that while shooting this sequence, he was listening to the T2 soundtrack obsessively. Bucky shoots out the cable hook, lets it run, breaks, grabs the hook with his vibranium arm, and punches the ground, completely flipping the truck. It's definitely one of my favorite moves I've ever seen in a Marvel movie, and I love that the Thunderbolts can't help but nerd out. Even John, who has fought alongside Bucky before. Val and Mel return to the Watchtower. The existing structure of Avengers Tower is still there, but Ox has built over it a new black facade that, if ever completed, would change its silhouette, looking like the comic depictions in which Sentry's hidden Watchtower was kind of enveloping Avengers Tower. Val asks Mel if she looks nurturing enough. I think this whole beat where she's manipulating Bob and getting him to work for her is very similar to the plot of Dark Avengers, where Norman Osborn manipulates Bob through his desire to be a hero and contain the void and keep his wife Lindy happy. And through this, Norman was able to get Bob to do some pretty awful things. Due to his mental issues, Bob finds himself being manipulated a lot, either by himself or other heroes or psychiatrists or his enemies. There's also a very interesting moment in this part of the movie where Val mentions she knows about Bob's father and how he treated him and his mother, to which Bob replies,
"Stop! No, I didn't say you could know that."
And then the room shakes and Val is moving on to the next thing, and she never mentions his father again. I wonder if Bob just wiped her mind there. The line, "I didn't say you could know that," really sounds like he might be in control and is aware that he has some capacity to alter memory. This led to Noah coming up with a really cool theory that Bob might have locked himself in the Ox vault after realizing he killed a lot of scientists in that lab he's transformed in. That would be pretty similar to the situation in the first Sentry run, where Sentry and Reed Richards worked together to wipe his and the entire Earth's memory of Sentry after the Void murdered 1 million people in New York. Val touches his hand, and then we're taken into Valentina's shame memory. The day when, as a girl in Italy, she accidentally told a man in town where she and her father lived, and then that man killed her father in front of her. Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, also known as the Contessa in earlier years, first appeared in the 1968 Strange Tales run as a companion to Nick Fury. She was born in Italy, and her parents were killed for aiding some unspecified resistance movement. I assume her father's involvement in that resistance is what got him killed in this scene. Italy was under fascist rule during World War II, but Valentina would have been too young to be a kid during that time. It's not clear why her father was killed in the scene, but I'm assuming the killer was someone outside the law, which is why she's so obsessed with world security and having the strongest weapons. Now, when Mel talks to Val, the necklace she's been wearing all movie really stands out in this scene. Many have likened it with a Songbird icon. Songbird, Melissa Gold, Screamin' Mimi was part of the original Thunderbolts lineup when it was created by Baron Zemo. That's not the Thunderbolts era that this movie's focusing on. This movie's adapting something closer to the Dark Reign era mixed in with Sentry's comic arcs. Bucky restrains Alexei, Ava, Yelena, and John. He puts Ghost in the Chitauri handcuffs that we saw earlier, which keep her from phasing away. John is restrained by a length of rebar that Bucky bent around him. Alexei calls Bucky Mr. Soldier, and I feel like there's a running gag in the MCU of people's superhero names being swapped in for their real names or vice versa, like Tony Stark saying that Coulson's first name was Agent. Bucky realizes he has a team of heroes who can help him stop Val in New York. Alexei has dreamed of this moment to have a true Avengers team. Yes! So they get to New York while the city is supposed to be under curfew as of the finale of Daredevil Born Again Season 1, when Kevin Feige talked with a press roundtable about connections between Thunderbolts movie and the Daredevil series. He implied that there would not be any connection. John, Yelena, and Ava ride in the back of the car.
What about your hat?
The hat. The helmet?
Yeah, whatever you want to call it.
It's like cool, right? You like it?
Do you like the hat?
Yeah, I think the hat's pretty sweet.
Then cool.
I feel like the comments about his little hat are why John changes his headgear when they rebrand into the new Avengers in the post-credit scene. Alexei asks Bucky,
"What kind of super serum did you get?"
I don't know, regular. HYDRA.
HYDRA? Oh, fancy. Mine was Soviet recreation, but it's still good, you know. We are the same, you and me.
Well,
I mean, we are different, but we are the same.
Remember that even though HYDRA had a facility in Siberia, HYDRA was technically a bigger network and a separate organization than the normal Russian government was. So while the Russians, like the Americans, were all trying to recreate the super soldier serum in different and diluted ways, HYDRA had its own successful program that produced the Winter Soldiers. There were many, and ultimately that cocktail is what led to the batch that we saw in the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Bucky's plan is to just ram the truck into the lobby of the Watchtower. When he jumps out, I love how he rips the car door off, using it as a shield, recreating the first time his buddy Steve Rogers used a makeshift shield in 2011's Captain America: The First Avenger. The Thunderbolts beat the crap out of the Ox guards, and right outside are the same streets where the 2012 Avengers fought the Chitauri, with the same bridge level where Natasha and Steve fought in a later stage. Val invites them up the elevator. Val pours a drink from the bar, which is the same bar set that Tony Stark had in the 2012 Avengers movie. Val says,
"How crazy is it to think of all the monumental fights that happened exactly here where you're standing?"
Indeed, Tony Stark's face-off with Loki was was right here. The Avengers fought Ultron's first form here. In the time heist in Avengers Endgame, the future Avengers came back to this same spot to steal the Tesseract and the Scepter. Val taunts them, calling John
Junior Varsity Captain America.
She tells Bucky
less than half a term. Yikes.
I assume she assumes he's gonna die or have to resign after this political scandal. She calls Alexei an old Santa Claus, and she says Yelena looks too rough for that public role. She unveils Bob's new look as Sentry, and he is extremely comic accurate. The golden suit he wears looks like it's made out of the same fabric that they use for Anthony's star as Homelander in The Boys. I don't think that was an accident. Sentry is the same lab-grown perfect superhero with a hair-triggered dark side. Val says he's stronger than all the Avengers rolled into one and will soon be known as Earth's mightiest hero, taking the Avengers classic moniker and making it singular. Val orders Sentry to take down this violent group of criminals. Alexei attacks first while Yelena is trying to talk Bob down. Makes a lot of sense that it would be Alexei first because he's the only one who hasn't met Bob and doesn't know what he can do. Sentry tosses Alexei out the window and then pulls him back into the penthouse. Sentry folds John's shield into a taco. Bucky tries to stab him and even does his signature move of dropping the knife from one hand to the other that we saw in Captain America Winter Soldier, but he fails and Sentry punches him up and then flies up to catch him and hit him back down again. Bob even stops bullets mid-air with an outstretched hand like Neo. Bucky tries the same leaping punch that he used in Winter Soldier against Steve, but Bob catches Bucky's arm, superheats it, and then yanks it off. So the Thunderbolts regroup outside. Yelena in particular insults the others.
I suck! I'm terrible. We're all terrible.
As she says this New Yorker passing her on the sidewalk gives her the funniest look. Extra, extra of the year. Bob argues with Val on whether he should take orders from her, since if he's more powerful than the Avengers and they include a god, referring to Thor, then that makes him a god too. Now this isn't Bob talking, it's the Void. So that is what chokes Val so that Mel has to hit the kill switch. But as they leave, the shadows on the floor absorb in a Sentry and he turns black and boom. Tiny white eyes. I love the visual choice of the tiny white eyes because it does remind us of how the Void's eyes look in certain comics. Also in the 1990 film Ghost, you could see little eyes in the shadow of the demons that would drag Sam down into hell. Florence Pugh pours her heart into Yelena's confession to Alexei, how she feels so alone having lost her sister and her father, and then like John Walker's doom scrolling, we get another example of how these devices are psychologically killing us.
All I do is sit and look at my phone and think of all the terrible things that I've done, and then I go to work, and then I drink, and then I come home to no one, and I sit and I think about all the terrible things I've done.
Alexei reassures her that she was a light that would brighten every room, and that as a kid, she wanted to be the goalie on the Thunderbolt soccer team so that she could be the one everyone relies on when they made mistakes. Yes, even Poopy Pants Mandy. The way dark Sentry enters this scene is so creepy. Like it starts with people behind Yelena in the background just looking up as more and more civilians do the same. We see the dark silhouetted form just floating silently, waiting for people to realize he's there. The first Ox soldier who fires on him hears, and we hear the Void saying,
"Aren't you tired of fighting? Let me help you."
Like he sincerely believes that he's freeing all these people from their pain, and then he voids him, flattening him into a shadow. Jake Schreier confirmed to Collider's Perry Nemiroff that the look of the flat shadows was inspired by the blast shadows from the victims of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
That definitely came from images from Hiroshima and those kind of shadows. It's a frame and a half of animation between when they disappear and when they become a shadow, and anything longer than that starts to feel like you're getting into kind of CG vapor territory. So it has to be quick, but then that you almost feel exposed because it seems so simple. And then there's other things about it where, like, because it doesn't happen so often in the movie, it really functions best. Like the camera needs to be more or less in line, almost like an eclipse, like with where the voiding is happening and where the shadow goes, that if you look at it from a profile perspective, it doesn't really work because it's such a short effect.
You can see this inspiration playing out on screen, and it's why the voiding works so well in this film. It's so scary how fast it happens. It really is 1.5 frames exactly with like no warning. Holt and his helicopter pilot are among the first to get voided, resulting in a crash in the scaffolding and raining debris. So the Thunderbolts spring into action. Yelena sees a crashing truck. She calls Dad, and she jumps to Alexei, who springboard launches her toward the truck to save someone. This is the same move her sister Natasha did with Alexei's American counterpart Steve Rogers in this same spot in the Battle of New York in the 2012 Avengers film. It's such a fun callback. This truck hits a news van, sending it rolling to two more people, and Bucky uses his arm to bounce the truck out of harm's way. When the second helicopter crashes, Ghost phases in to push a guy out of the way, phasing out to let the fiery wreckage move through her. And as one huge piece of rubble nearly crushes a woman, John redeems his selfish move in the elevator shaft earlier when he freed the pressure against his back to now be the one hero to use that same back to push against the rubble despite not being able to hold it alone. And now the other Thunderbolts come to his aid. The applause they get isn't just for the individual saves, but I think the people are just happy to see them working together on something. Like they're inspired to see heroes cooperating in addition to individually saving people. Val clocks this and you can see her already getting ideas. Alexei saves a little girl in overalls, which must feel like a big win for a girl dad like him, but then oof. Them kids. The void voids person after person at random, even ones fleeing in terror, and their shadows spread and join together in a collective darkness. In the last issue of the original 2000s run, Sentry versus the Void, Reed describes the aftermath of the Void's attack on Manhattan. The comic shows a blacked out, exploded bridge, but unlike turning people into shadows like he does here, the Void in the comic just kind of like stabs people with black tendrils. Yelena walks toward the shadow, instinctively knowing that she has to join Bob in this darkness in order to help him. While everyone else was just trying to attack Bob, she always was the one trying to save him. Yelena closes her eyes for a moment before stepping into the void. This has been the film's shorthand for her preparing for death, as the first shot of the film was her taking a similar long, slow blink, and she also closed her eyes right before the vault incinerator ignited. Yelena again wakes up in the void shame room of her memory of getting Anya killed, but now she runs into a wall of a painted backdrop. This is a literal room, an enclosed set, like the Truman Show, a presentation of a moment that one is not meant to escape. This choice is something Jake Schreier credited to production designer Grace Yoon, who worked with him on Beef and the horror film Hereditary, and they wanted the surreal elements of this movie to feel practical. It's supposed to feel like a set, not like an actual forest. Yelena smashes through this set wall into another memory oriented 90 degrees to the forest, and when she looks back through the hole, she sees the forest looking back down at her with young Yelena and Anya and that guy all staring down at her. The idea of crashing through one's memories like this is also meant to remind us of the film Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. It's all so practical and cool. Yelena sees Bob in his attic through the mirror, but when she crashes through it, she just finds herself leaning on a bathtub, drunk and passed out. Her alternate self forces her to drink too. Yelena looks through another mirror and sees Bob, and we get another cool practical transition done mostly through lighting and shifting set walls into Bob's attic. We should also remember that this isn't the first time Yelena has looked through a bathroom mirror and experienced this surrealist transition. Hawkeye did show Yelena blipping from Thanos' snap from her point of view, and it looks like as she was looking through a bathroom mirror and she dusted out of and back into reality 5 years later, and the bathroom decor shifted around her. Yelena finds Bob dressed in his childhood clothes, fiddling with a Rubik's Cube as he witnesses his dad abusing his mom downstairs. Yelena corrects her earlier advice that we can't stuff down and bury our darkness, that it has to be something we work through together. And if you listen closely, you can hear his dad shouting, "Look at you, what are you gonna do?
Sit down.
Your hero, Bobby!"
Which ends up really sticking with him. Now, we never find out what the shame rooms looked like for the other characters, like Alexei, Ava, or Bucky. Bucky just kind of jokes that he has a great past, so it went great. We saw quite a few of his shame flashbacks in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier as he went on his apology tour, but I assume the 1991 killing of Tony Stark's parents were one of those rooms. This is something that Wyatt Russell is excited to explore further for John as well. In an interview, he said, quote, "Maybe in the future, if you don't kill me in this next movie, would be nice to explore. Would be some of the things that John had to do in his past or things that he hasn't reconciled with. That means usually that receiving a Medal of Honor means it's the worst day of your life, and that it's something that I don't think he's ever reconciled with." Meanwhile, outside, the Void takes over the entire city. We see a workplace where the shadow voids the onlookers, but also drapes over the light fixtures and blacks out the computer screens. In a wide shot, the shadow starts to work its way up Freedom Tower, but doesn't completely engulf it. Maybe it's just too sad to see that one get fully harmed in any way. Back in the Void, John bashes Bob's abusive dad in the face, and they fall down to an outdoor street corner with an obviously painted backdrop. Here's the memory Bob hinted at earlier when he was addicted to meth and working as a spinny sign chicken for Alfredo's bail bonds. Later in the credit sequence, Yellow Chicken is drawn over Bucky to remind us of this moment. Bucky knocks this guy out, and then we loop back to the Malaysian lab where all this began for Bob and for us. Bob says he was looking for more drugs in Southeast Asia until some guy approached him for a medical study, which ended up being Ox experimenting on addicts just like him, and it worked on Bob, releasing the Void. The Void restrains the others as he taunts Bob into attacking him. They fight, and the Void knocks him down and says this,
"We will always be alone."
We see the others stretching away from Bob, and Bob tackles the Void, punching him. The Void laughs, and in addition to his pinprick eyes, we see his pale white teeth. Ugh. Fighting the void like this is only helping the darkness spread into Bob's body, so Yelena breaks free and leaps over to Bob to hold him back. The others join in. The refusal to fight the void is what repels this darkness, so the void releases its clutches from the city. And yep, even the girl comes back. We do have to ask, what kind of shame room did that young girl go into? Afterwards, Bob has no memory of what they just went through, so his memory blackouts are still affecting him. He's not fully healed, he just now knows how to keep the void from taking over completely. Now, why is Bob wearing the same blue sweatshirt that he was wearing in his void memory? There's a lot of ways to interpret it. Like maybe that is just some lingering effect of the void that just kind of melted away that golden suit that Val gave him. Ultimately, this movie does not answer where the darkness comes from, but it does teach us how to manage that darkness, to face it head on, to not fight it, and to know that you're never alone, because it is something that we all go through. They step up to Val to arrest her, and we realize she tricked them into a press conference. Ending movies in a press conference is a device Kevin Feige loves to do to signal that this movie will be the arrival of someone important. Tony Stark at the end of Iron Man, Peter Parker at the end of Spider-Man Homecoming, T'Challa at the UN in the mid-credit scene of Black Panther, and now the lineup that Val names here.
Meet the new Avengers.
Now you'll notice one of the microphones on the podium is WHIH, the MCU in-universe news service. As people applaud and ask questions, Yelena leans over to Val to whisper,
"We own you now."
And we end the film back in a close-up of Yelena taking a sigh of relief as Alan Silvestri's Avengers theme plays over the score. Now, we have to talk about this amazing end credit sequence that was put together by the artists at Imaginary Forces. Director Jake Schreier said that to offset any skepticism or confusion the audience may feel by this movie ending with declaring this lineup as the new Avengers, Kevin Feige recommended a credits montage of headlines showing the media of this world mocking them for that, to give those viewers time to laugh along and to adjust to the idea by the end to kind of defend this group as the rightful new Avengers. That's what the asterisk was all about. And even the Monday after this movie came out, part of the marketing campaign for this movie was to tear away the Thunderbolts title and rename the movie as New Avengers. Kind of a Sentry-esque retcon, if you ask me. So among these end credits, we see various headlines. An article titled, "New Avengers? New Avengers, Triumph or Disaster? The world holds its breath. What comes next?" And a lift-out quote saying, "Not my Avengers." And then vertical text saying, "Nope." Another one saying, "Really? The heroes no one asked for." A cover of The Hollywood Reporter with the Thunderbolts/New Avengers fighting with each other. There's a New York Times op-ed by Jen Roberts titled, "Is New Always Better?" Then an op-ed by David Brooks, who is a real-life New York Times writer, headlined, "I like 'em." A Rolling Stone cover showing 4 of them pose like Queen and the famous Bohemian Rhapsody cover pose with "Ready to Rock." Then exclusive, spotted, "Bob who? Mystery Man with New Avengers." Then a snarky New York Post headline, "B-Vengers? Best Hope or Big Joke?" A headline, "The Huh Heard Around the World." A cover of the New Republic with art showing Red Guardian like King Kong on the Empire State Building. Cover art of John Walker sadly riding his bent shield like a saddle with no horse under it. A Rosie the Riveter style, "Can we do it?" poster of Yelena. A New York Times Magazine cover art of the new Avengers on a construction beam with the city behind them like the famous photo. An article titled, "How Will They Lead?" showing the new Avengers pose like the famous painting of Washington crossing the Delaware with Yelena's guinea pig on the bow of the boat. And lastly, Red Guardian holding a flower out to the little girl, I think the one that he saved before she was turned into a shadow, an homage to the famous moment in 1931's Frankenstein, which is a bit ironic considering David Harbour voices Erik Frankenstein in James Gunn's Creature Commandos. That leads to 2 post-credit scenes, the second of which was directed by the Russo brothers, a scene that will be part of Avengers Doomsday, similar to the post-credit scene for Fantastic Four First Steps. So this scene is really designed to seamlessly integrate the new Avengers into the same MCU of Avengers Doomsday as a welcome party to the Fantastic Four. So while the Thunderbolts film was an emotionally heavy exploration of mental health, it really ends with an additional layer of a familiar Avengers-level crisis. The mid-credit scene, though, showed Alexei fishing for recognition in the cereal aisle of a grocery store, proud of being on the Wheaties box. The second scene takes us 14 months later with the new Avengers in the New Avengers HQ. So why 14 months later specifically? Well, we know the Thunderbolts film takes place after the events of Captain America Brave New World because Val referenced the president turned into Red Hulk, and we could see the damage Red Hulk did to the Washington Monument being repaired. Captain America Brave New World was in April 2027. Thunderbolts, we're assuming from the autumn leaves, is in fall 2027. So that would put Doomsday set in early 2029. We learned that Sam Wilson is suing the new Avengers for trademark infringement placement, and Bucky said that it didn't go well when he tried to talk to Sam Wilson. I'm assuming Bucky was protecting misunderstood super soldier Bob the way he was a misunderstood super soldier, and Avengers like Thor, Carol, and Sam Wilson all demanded Bob turn himself in to try to contain the void threat. There are some fun details throughout the scene. The red star on Bucky's sleeve, in addition to recalling his red star on his Winter Soldier arm, also has a segmented form of his star from Sam Wilson's Captain America's shield. The sponsors on Alexi's new Avengers tracksuit are all real-life brands who have done product integrations with Marvel Studios. Peloton got a product placement when President Ross worked out on it in Brave New World, and you'll remember the Tide commercials for that movie. Bob is relaxing and seems to have been working on himself and refuses to use his powers for fear of reviving the void. The book that Bob is reading is Rick Rubin's The Creative Act, A Way of Being, which shows that he's working on his mental health in whatever proactive way that he can. I really hope that Bucky doesn't let this guy read Kierkegaard, because it'll just bum him out and give him the wrong ideas about moral philosophy. Yelena complains that they weren't looped in on the pre-existing space crisis, maybe because Nick Fury, head of Saber, could be giving this intel to Sam's Avengers and Carol Danvers specifically, but there is some kind of crisis that's happening before the Fantastic Four ship gets there, and I think that's going to be an incursion rift in space above Earth. Now you'll notice that John still carries around his bent shield, which just looks sad, but he does have a new suit with brighter colors and a military beret similar to the one that we saw him wearing in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but blue during that football scene where he was being interviewed. I really like the logo of the new Avengers with the crossbar of the A striking through the hairline like a spike, and the fact that the new Avengers got enough funding from Val to redesign the penthouse level of the tower to have this blast door, making it more secure than it was when just an elevator from the ground floor would open right into the penthouse. When Val was trying to resume construction to make it Sentry's watchtower, you could see that she moved a bunch of the Battle of New York relics from the gala in there, including Loki's scepter and Chitauri weapons. I assume from that she poured all of her Ox Group resources into fortifying this tower. And while this base has voice commands and satellite links, Yelena implies that they're still out of the loop with interplanetary threats. This voice tells him that there's an unidentified craft entering Earth's orbit.
Satellite image populating. Extra-dimensional ship entering atmosphere.
This voice computer might be Clock, CLOC, Sentry's computer companion that typically lives in the watchtower, though it sometimes can fly above the watchtower in the sphere. And then we get this moment. It's the Fantastic Four's ship, the Excelsior, or it might not be the same Excelsior that we saw in the Fantastic Four film, because here you'll notice it has 4 fins instead of 3. The Fantastic Four post-credit scene was set 4 years after the events of that film, so some time has passed. We still do not know who is on the ship. All kinds of theories are there. Maybe it's just Herbie, maybe it's the Fantastic Four after going to the X-Men dimension. Some have said, hey, maybe it's Dr. Doom using it. I don't know if that's the case. Dr. Doom wouldn't benefit from using a ship that was just as unfamiliar to the people he was visiting than whatever vessel he would use, but it might be the Fantastic Four seeking where their son Franklin went with Dr. Doom. Ultimately, we know that things are headed to Battle World, a continent of stitched together broken universes created by Dr. Doom, and Sentry could play a big role in that. Thunderbolts director Jake Schreier suggested that Sentry's power set will be important in Doomsday, and Sentry is famous enough in Marvel Comics as a guy who beat up Galactus to a draw and ripped Ares in half. We'll see who in Doomsday gets ripped in half, but in other videos I posed this interesting theory that I really think the setting of Avengers Doomsday could be on all 3 of these worlds that are just kind of merged together and smushed together like a triple Venn diagram, and that there's giant rifts in the sky that just show you an aerial view of the neighboring universe. We'll see if that's what's happening outside these windows from this post-credit scene. But that's all the new stuff we saw in Thunderbolts. Comment down below with your thoughts, and a huge thanks to Noah Chen for researching this video, and a special thanks to one of our YouTube members, Jeremy Dunham, who supports us at the executive producer level. Follow me at EA Voss and subscribe to all the channels in the new Rockstars network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.